All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the stream. So tonight we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday, and I'm starting a little bit early tonight, hoping to get a little bit more done. So we'll have a little bit longer of a stream tonight, I'm hoping, if we need it anyway. And so just want to welcome everybody here, give a minute for folks to sort of trickle in and whatnot. So while we're waiting, I do want to take just a quick second, and I want to thank the people who support this stream as well as my YouTube channel and my work in general. And they are all the people that you see here on screen, starting with the partners. The partners are the highest tier on Patreon and YouTube memberships. So that is Caden Parker, Arslia, Gerbolis Inc., Paul S., Super Awesome, and Wen Cheng. Thank you very much for your support. I'd also like to thank everybody else here on the screen as well under the supporters section. This includes the Twitch subscribers, the YouTube members, and the Patreon members as well. So thank you very much to everybody on this screen. I also want to take a quick second to thank all of you who are here viewing the stream live, interacting with me, or those of you who are catching this on YouTube couple of weeks out when it actually gets uploaded there as an archive. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. So I really appreciate you guys being here and following along with the project and whatnot. So thank you all for being here. And with all of that said and done, let's go ahead and kind of try and jump into it a little bit here. So last night, we left off sort of in the middle of getting our meshes integrated into our scene system. So we had our 3 cubes here that we loaded up some configuration for and added them to our scene. And then we also have a couple of other meshes that we're going to need to update, such as the Sponza mesh and the car mesh, but we want to keep the loading of those dynamic. So we did go ahead and adjust the code for those as well. So we basically had gotten all of that in place, and the last thing that we're going to need to move over is mostly what is in the render loop in the game code right now, which is all the stuff around the views and the frustum culling, things of that nature. So we're going to focus on moving that over tonight and getting all of that working. It did occur to me after I ended the stream last night that we probably should have actually been drawing some meshes, and we weren't. And I have a couple of ideas as to why that might be. So I wanted to kind of start there and see if we can get the meshes drawing as is, and then once we actually get to that point, then we can move on from there. Argix, I think that's how you pronounce it. Argix, hello, welcome to the stream. I appreciate you being here. First time chat, so thank you for that. Glad to see you here. That is one thing I do want to mention as well that I forgot to bring up is this is an interactive stream. So if you guys have any questions or comments along the way, feel free to drop them. Oh, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Feel free to drop them in the chat, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. I am keeping an eye on that, so every few minutes I'll take a look over there and see what's up. All right. So let's just close a couple things here that I don't think we're going to need. I don't think we're going to need the mesh anymore open. We're not going to need the skybox stuff open. I don't think we'll need the Vulkan backend. I think the change that we're going to have to make is going to be in here within the simple scene, specifically when we're actually populating the render packet. So if we take a look at our scene, our meshes are actually, it's pointers to meshes, right? So when we're adding a mesh to this array, we are adding a pointer to it, not the actual mesh itself. And I suspect we've done something wrong here, which is why stuff isn't rendering. Let's check our add first, I guess. So let's go add mesh. So we're taking our mesh here. We're we're doing our initialization or load. We're pushing M into that, which may or may not be correct. I suspect we might actually have to do this a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up the game first. Let's debug this and see if we can nail this down first. Not really a question, but it would be nice if all videos in your channel have the comments section enabled. I understand that you might want to avoid annoying comments, but that's part of being a YouTuber. I think the comments are enabled on all my videos, I believe. Are there some of them that you're not able to enter comments on? Because I answer comments like on the daily. So if there's one that's doesn't have it enabled, I should probably fix that. But yeah, they should be enabled. If you have a specific example, let me know. But yeah, I actually actively encourage people to leave comments on the YouTube videos because, of course, doing all this stuff live, you're going to make mistakes, right? It's going to happen. Somebody is going to catch things that I have done wrong that I have not caught. Of course, it always happens with extra pairs of eyes. And I encourage that, right? Because that's a learning experience, both for everybody else that's following along as well as me, right? Like, I don't consider myself an expert at any of this stuff. I've been doing it for a number of years, but, you know, every once in a while I do certainly learn things from the comments. So I actively encourage that. Okay, so we have the game running, but we don't have any meshes showing. Our skybox shows, but not our meshes, right? I swear to God, there was a recent video that had them disabled, but I can't find it. I wonder if it was a bug on YouTube. Because I think you have to explicitly turn comments off when you upload, which I never do. But if you do find it, please let me know. Okay, so we're not drawing any of these. So let's have a look at the populate render packet. And we'll put a... Oh, wait a minute. Right, we're not doing this yet. But regardless, we should still be able to actually do it. We should be still building it in the game code itself. Let's see. So let's go to application render. Here's where we're setting up all the views. Here's where we're populating the render packet for the scene. Here is where we build the world render packet. Oh, I bet this is the problem, actually. We're probably not building up this, or maybe we are. Let's put a breakpoint. So, world geometries, we could see the first one here. So that's all zeroed out, and we have no geometry. So that's not a very good sign. And I'm assuming that that is probably because, well, actually, what direction were we facing? Is frustum culling actually getting in the way here? I don't think so. Let me relaunch just to be safe. Must have been a one-time glitch, I guess. Yeah, it probably was, because like I said, I definitely don't disable them. And if YouTube has started doing that, then I need to look into that. All right, so we have nothing being drawn here. Our app frame data, world geometries are not being added. Let me make sure that this is actually not becoming an issue. So we have world geometries here. I guess I could just look at the draw count down here. So I will just continue. And draw count is 0. So why is draw count 0? So we're looking at state meshes. I wonder if it's a generation issue. We might have introduced a bug actually when I set the generation to invalid. initially. So let's see, we'll cycle this, right? So the mesh, we have a generation, or we have a geometry count rather. We don't have a resource name, so that's the config, right? The generation is 255, which is invalid. It has a unique identifier. Okay, so it looks like the generation is not being updated. So actually the geometries themselves look fine. We have a material. Okay, so I think the problem is that we actually had set the generation to invalid ID incorrectly. Now the question is, did we, let's see, that would actually be in mesh, which I closed, I think. Right here. So when we unload that, we have invalid ID U8. When we load, do we actually, so we set that to 0 when we load on the geometries themselves, but not the mesh. And the mesh up here, what was it? And create, I think. So load from resource starts it off with invalid ID. Let's see. So this is all the job loading, success, blah, blah, blah. Mesh, out mesh, generation plus plus. So that should actually be flipping that over. Did I do that here or did I do that somewhere else? Let me see. Those are the only places that are setting the mesh generation. So why would that still be invalid ID even though we have loaded it? Something tells me that maybe we did not load these like we thought we did. So let's go to simple scene load, I suppose. We have our meshes here. This takes a pointer to a mesh, which should be this. All right, so let's actually relaunch the application. See if we hit our breakpoints here. So we have our simple scene load. This is the skybox, we can skip that. All right, so our mesh load, we have our first mesh. So here we are acquiring from config. We set the generation to 0 explicitly. This is for the, this is for the mesh. So at this point we should be, wait a minute. We're disposing of the config here. Geometry config at sub I. Yeah, that should be fine to do. Right, so the mesh generation here is 0. Okay, so that worked fine. This is doing the same thing. And I'm going to step over this last one. So that's at sub 2. So it looks like our meshes are actually being updated as expected. Okay. So I guess our state meshes our state meshes are, so that one is 0, that one is 0, and that one is 0. This next one should be invalid ID. Nope, it's also 0. So this is all, actually this whole block is 0. So this means that I probably screwed up somewhere in passing these along, because these are apparently not right. So this is just an array of meshes. So passing the address of these things should be sufficient. Posture check. Posture check. Yes, okay. I'm leaning over. I will not do that. There we go. Let me aim this up a little bit more. Thank you for the posture check. And stretch. And we'll stretch. Let's give me an opportunity to think. Oops, hit the microphone. Nice. Okay. Thank you for the redeems. Hydrate, okay. Cool. All right, thank you for that. Now, the real question here is, what am I passing through that is not right here? So, mesh create, and then we add the mesh here, and we pass along the address of the mesh at sub-0. So I'll step into this. We're not initialized, we're not loaded yet, but we are going to push the pointer to the mesh, right? We're going to push that onto the scene meshes array. So that should be there now, which it is. We have our address as expected. Okay, and all of this, oh, this is 0. I wonder if I should be initializing that. I wonder if I should be initializing that to a non-zero value when I create it. Probably should, since that's what we're looking for to render it. So let's do mesh create. We'll say out mesh generation equals invalid ID U8, because that is a U8, right? Yep. So at the very least, when we do mesh create, we should be setting that. All right, I'm just going to skip over this real quick. So state mesh is 0. Okay, that is invalid ID now, which is 255. So that is what we expect. And I assume the others are going to work the same way. So I'm going to put a breakpoint in. Let's do initialize. So we'll do initialize and we'll do load. All right. So at this point, we should have added all the meshes, right? So we should have 3, and we do. Mesh initialize, scene meshes, sub I. Okay, so that should have done the thing. We have one geometry. The geometries array has been created, so that looks fine. The transform, I think. Yeah, the transform's been created, right? So we have 0 rotation, 0 position, 1 scale. It is dirty. Okay, so that looks correct. All right, so let's do mesh initialize one more time. Let's actually step into it. So we have configs. So we have a geometry count again, which is 1. We create the array, return true, and that is now meshes sub 1. So meshes let's do it this way. We'll go to the watch window here, meshes sub 1. Take a look at this. So we do have a generation that's invalid ID, so that is correct. Let's take a look at 2 before we initialize it, because that should be still 0, right? Or rather, this is correct, but the geometry count should be 0, right? And we do not have a geometries array. So when we step over this, that should now be geometry count 0. Does this not automatically update? Oh, I was at the end of that last loop, so now it should do it. There we go. Okay, so we have that being created. So that all looks good. So the initialize is happening correctly. The load, which should come here. The load, let's go ahead and switch this back to the first element. So we should have 3, right? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to step over this load. And we have a unique ID. We have flipped over the generation, the geometries has been loaded, it looks like. We have material. That all looks good. Okay, so the generation is invalid because it's not finished loading it yet, I guess. So that's fine. Question, will WASM be added as a platform in the future for web builds? You know, I haven't decided yet, to be completely honest. There are some difficulties that come with that. It would be interesting to try and port this to that, though. The only thing I would have to consider would be sort of the plugin architecture, and I'd probably have to write. I think in order for that to work, I'd have to write an OpenGL renderer plugin that could be ported to obviously use WebGL. Because right now using Vulkan, that's not going to work. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but so yes, but with an asterisk. It's probably very far down the road. Ikis, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, that's like that is like a spam message, so I'm just not going to read that out loud. All right. I think that's a bot, yeah. I'm actually not familiar with how to actually remove that, so I need to figure that out. There it is. Okay. All right. So, where were we? So we were looping through the meshes. I'm just going to step a couple more times here. We do have this mesh load happening on a job, so it's asynchronous. It technically happens on another thread. You can see here where these jobs are queued. They're not technically going to take until the next update to the job system occurs, and then they'll be assigned out. So we have jobs queued to load those things up, but all right, so that part makes sense. So let me do a breakpoint in here where we build a packet, right? So we have these world geometries. Actually, let me see where this is actually being filled out. So here we're reserving the array. So this was where we were running into problems before. So the mesh generation itself, which I think we confirmed that those were all 0, right? The mesh generation here is still 255. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to move forward a few frames. Give those things time to load, right? And then come down here and inspect again. And we'll take a look at world geometries. World geometries. We'll take a look at 0 first. Looks like we don't have any geometry. We don't have a unique ID. Do we have... Oh, I think I need to use the underscore version of that. Let's just step into this because this actually goes ahead and gets that for us. So we don't want this. We want building out the render packet. So we're going to go into the view. So the geometries, we're creating a new array there, which that's another thing we really need to fix. Getting all of these, getting the distances. Geometry data count is 0. So the geometry data is what is passed in here. And that's an empty array. So that tells me that our world geometries is not being populated even now. So why is it not being populated? Let's try and figure that out. Because at this point we should have loaded, right? So yeah, see, and generation is still 255. Let's see. Even if it wasn't a bot, I don't think self-advertisement is nice. Yeah, generally not. That's why if I see something like that, I just delete it, because it's... I'd love for people to, freely advertise for me, but, nobody's going to do that, so I'm not going to do it for free either, unless I really like what they're doing, of course. All right. So why then? So these all have unique IDs. They have geometries. But for some reason, the generation never gets flipped over. I could have swore last night I changed something with this, and now I'm trying to remember what the heck it was I changed. Was there anything in here having to do with instance ID? I don't think there was. This is just initializing and loading. Is it not in Git? Yeah, I do have a branch up. I guess I could just pull that up. That's probably the way to do it, to be honest. I did push a feature branch. Let's see. So we'll go to simple scenes. And we will go to our commits here. Let's see. So it should have been this guy. The problem is I changed this API all around last night too, so I'm not 100% sure that it's going to stick out to me where I changed it. And I might also be thinking of something that I later reverted. What did I change? See, this is the kind of stuff that you get when you code live. So you run into stuff and it's like, why doesn't this work? And then you have to sort of dig through what you changed and try and figure it out. And I figure this might be a good or decent learning experience for anybody who is learning how to debug and learning how all this stuff works. I'm hoping that this kind of troubleshooting is useful on some level. I don't see anything here though that is immediately sticking out to me, so I might have actually changed it. So we have the mesh load here. The only place I'm really setting it is here. So I guess let me look at the job itself and see what that's actually doing. So when we load, if we're not loading from a resource, we are doing acquire from config. So acquire from config goes through each one of the geometries, makes sure that its geometry ID is invalid, sets up auto release and reference counts, and then pulls the geometry ID from the register geometries. So that should all be fine. Let's see, but that's just the acquire. That is just the acquire. You can't hear me? Like at all? That's weird. Yeah, I was going to say, I see on my levels that... Oh, okay. Oh, you were muted. Okay. Scared me there for a second. I was like, wait a minute. I've been talking to just myself this whole time. Awesome. Okay. So... why isn't this... I probably missed a step somewhere, I'll bet. So we have the create geometry, which is ultimately what renders, reaches out to the renderer and uploads the geometry to the GPU. And that is being called from acquire from config, unless we're getting one of these errors, right? Are we getting any weird errors in here? Should probably be looking at my logs too. I don't see anything. Should probably look at the terminal. That'd be a little easier to identify. Okay, so I'm not getting any errors here or warnings that I see. It's just assigning out the jobs, loading them up. Yeah, I don't see anything here that is that looks off. So acquire from config. Let me go back here. Acquire from config is ultimately what triggers the load. Or we may be doing this wrong. So let's see. We'll do mesh load. We'll step into that. Acquire from config. Let me restart this because I actually want to hit that breakpoint and see what it's doing. All right. Oh, rude. Why are you doing that? Why is it trying to open that? Where actually is it? Okay. Let me stop, rebuild. Stuff like this makes me more paranoid, and I had to print in every other line. Yeah. I get what you mean. I do that a lot too when I'm debugging. Did I break things again? Absolutely, I broke things. Actually, I'm trying to figure out. I technically broke things last night, and I'm trying to figure it out tonight. So that's one of the reasons I started early, is just because I don't exactly know where I went wrong. Okay, so this is for the skybox, so that one I can skip. So mesh load, I'll step into that. We are getting the geometry from the config. Why does it keep doing that? All right, I'll just continue. Acquire from config, right. So the geometry here, the generation is 65,535. So if we step into that, why does it keep doing this? It's like it's trying to step through mem copy, which is really dumb. Why is it doing that all of a sudden? Could have swore I told it not to do that. All right, I guess I'll have to set a little bit more intelligent of a breakpoint next time. Your code works perfectly every time. That is absolute rubbish, sir. Nobody's code works perfectly every time. Unless you're writing Hello World, maybe. And even then, it's possible to get bugs. So the problem with this is the job itself. Was it under geometry utils? No, I don't think it was there. It was under mesh loader. No, I think this is the file IO. Nope, that's the file IO one. Where was the? Let's go all the way into this. Okay. Acquire from config. Have to set a breakpoint here because VS Code is challenging me tonight. So register geometries 1. The ID is 0. Oh, right, it's just trying to find a slot for that, so that's fine. Okay, so we found a slot for that. Create geometry. All right. Render or create geometry. We will get the Vulkan version of this. It's not a re-upload. So here we get an internal geometry ID. So that should be fine. We allocate some stuff out of the render buffer. We load the data. Then we handle the index data, which we are using in this case. Internal data generation, so we up that. And then we're not re-uploading, so we don't have to worry about freeing the old buffer data. Okay, so that is successful. Here is where we acquire the material, which we don't really need to step through. I don't care about that. I'm pretty sure that's actually being done correctly. So we've acquired, or created the geometry rather. We've uploaded it to the GPU. The mesh generation here is set to 0. So unique ID for generation 0. Okay. So I'm just going to step over this last instance. Step out. Okay. That's it for that. So the simple scene is loaded. So at this point, our state, what did I put? Meshes, I think I called it. Take a look at this. The generation is in fact 0. Okay. So at this point, we should, let's see. These are the next meshes. Oh, well, wait a minute now. When I did this, it flipped that back. Okay. If something is not complete, then I consider it bug-free until I declare it to be a release project. And even then, it's not bug-free, right? Like, what code realistically is. There's always bugs. It's just what you're willing to ship with, basically. Okay, so that's interesting. So when I did this assignment, my state meshes, like, generation got clobbered somehow. Which makes absolutely no sense. So let me see, maybe there's something up here that I'm like, I've got an off by 1 or something. So here's our first cube config. We have a geometry count of 1. We set up the geometry configs. The first one is just obtained from here. Okay, and then we create a mesh passing that config. And then that is looking for, let me stop this. That is looking for meshes sub-0, right? And there's 10 of these guys. I wonder if I should like 0 that out just to be sure. Shouldn't matter though. In fact, it should already be 0'd because of the way we allocate. Okay, so we create the mesh, we store it in meshes sub-0 here, then we set the transform, and then we add the mesh to the simple scene, which is passing the address of that mesh. So that all makes sense. Can't have bugs if nothing is 100% complete. I don't know. I mean, I look at a bug as any anomaly in the software, right? Like any anytime you have something in the software that doesn't act the way that it should, that's technically a bug, right? Even if the software isn't complete, like you're constantly kind of fixing bugs as you're developing. It's just kind of the way it goes. All right, so cube 1 config. Well, that was cube 0, so this is cube 1. State meshes, sub 1. We set the transform. We set a parent, right? And then we add mesh, state meshes, sub 1. Here, the third cube, we have cube 2 config. We create that to meshes sub 2. Set the transform, set the parent, and add mesh given state meshes sub 2. None of that looks wrong to me. None of that looks wrong at all. So actually, I'm going to set a breakpoint here after all this stuff is done. And I'm going to get rid of these other breakpoints because we don't need them. And let's just take a look at some of these state meshes. So state meshes sub 0 has a generation of 0, which is correct. State meshes sub 1 has a generation of 0, which is correct. 2, generation sub 0, which is correct. Technically 3 also has 0, but because we haven't created anything there, it's not marked as invalid because this whole block of memory was initialized to 0. And the only reason we really know that this has not been initialized is because of all these, this null pointer here and the geometry count and the unique ID are all zeros, which is not valid. If in doubt, git reset and check every hunk and every commit until it stops working to find the culprit. So that's the thing, like I kind of half expected it to break last night because I was moving so much stuff around. And so I have a feeling here this is just a symptom of me moving stuff around. And it's all stuff that I have to move around to get this working. So it's probably just somewhere where I'm like not using a pointer correctly. Like that's probably what's screwing me, to be completely honest. All right, so let's move this breakpoint a little bit further down. Womp womp. So we're invalidating all meshes right here. This is where it's done. Found it. So, it probably would be a good idea to do this before I load up all the meshes. So, I don't know, somewhere like up here at the very start. This is what was doing it. I knew it was going to be something stupid. I can almost guarantee this is going to work now. Let's just run. And I'm going to kill breakpoints. In fact, let's just run. What do you know? It works. Something so stupid, right? Out of curiosity, I'm also going to try loading up our other two meshes and see if that works through our new API as well. And it does not look like it did, because we are loading models here and it's not actually doing anything. Which is interesting, because that means it's probably stuck somewhere along the pipeline while we're loading the job. So, yeah, it's interesting as to why that job is stuck. Let me see if I can actually figure that out, right? So this is the main thread. It's not going to be there. I wonder which one of these it's going to be. It's probably going to be one of these thread runs, right? Let's take a look at this one. So that one is doing a platform sleep. This one's doing a platform sleep. You just have to figure out which one it is. Actually, it's possible. It's possible it hung for some other reason. Because it doesn't look like any of these threads are actually hung up on something. Like they're all sleeping. I could probably reduce the thread count, to be honest. I don't really need this many threads, but whatever. Allows me to load a lot of stuff at once. So that's interesting. So let's have a look in our logic up here for, what did I put that under? I think it would have been on key, maybe? Oh, no, it's here. So here's where we're doing the Falcon mesh. And then here's where we're doing the Sponza mesh. So I'm wondering if one of these is just like wrong. So I guess we can breakpoint this, right? And hit the L key. So that kicks this off. So we set up our config, which has a 0 geometry count and no configs, but has a resource name. So we know how to treat it when we go into mesh create and ultimately add mesh, right? So mesh create, we copy over the config, invalidate the generation. So that is all good. Simple scene add mesh. So let's go in here. We are beyond the initialized state. So whoops, wait a minute. Womp womp. So we're not actually adjusting the scene state, which is why this didn't work. That's neat. So what we actually need to do is in initialize, we need to set the scene state, right? So our scene states, so we have initialized, right? So we don't really care about the initializing. Then we have loading, loaded, right? So we actually need to set those states so that we actually know what the heck we're doing. So right before we return true down here, update the state to show the scene is initialized. So scene state equals simple scene state initialized, right? And I'm actually going to copy this because we're going to need to do it in a couple of other places. So when we load, once we get past this initial check, we are going to change this to loading to show that the scene is currently loading. And for now, I'm going to actually put this down here, which is loaded. This is going to wind up changing because we're actually going to have to queue for this a little bit or query for this. So the fact that we have jobified the loading for our meshes and our textures means that we need to have some sort of way to queue up, if you will, some of these meshes to say, hey, are we loaded? Is our material fully loaded? And if then we are fully loaded, how many of our total meshes have everything loaded versus those that don't? And if that is not a one-to-one match, then we do not flip this flag. However, we're not that advanced yet. For now, we're just going to say it's loaded once we've actually kicked off the loading routine for everything here. Let's see. So it stopped working because you told it to, so that ain't a bug, but intended behavior. Bethesda probably. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. That's me being an idiot, is what that is. How come you don't use macros? I do use macros. I do use them quite a lot in like darray, for example. Right? This uses macros pretty heavily, actually, down here towards the bottom rather. But I try not to like overuse them because that can be a bad thing as well. You know what? While we're at it, let's set this to unloading. Currently unloading. And then we're also immediately going to set it to unloaded. Right? And we don't actually have any unload logic yet, so we're going to have to actually handle that sometime very, very soon. But I figure we'll get the loading stood up first, and then we'll do the unloading. So for now, I'll just put those in there. Once it's unloaded, where were the? I think the only other one was uninitialized. So that is what we do when we destroy the scene, which is right here. So, which actually we don't even have to explicitly do because we zero out the scene. And wouldn't you know it, but the scene itself, or the scene state rather, the default is uninitialized by design. So this is actually 0, so when we zero out the memory, it's uninitialized automatically for us. I see a lot of if not something, k-error return false. That could use a macro like assert or something that uses k-error. Yeah, probably, I think what I'm going to do is probably for a lot of that code, I will probably wrap at least some of it in macros. I don't like to hide that logic early on in development just because I like to be super explicit as to what's going on. That would be something I'd probably do in a cleanup pass. Just because it makes it a lot easier as I'm debugging to actually step through the lines of code and see exactly what's happening. But yeah, I would agree. You know, a lot of that stuff could probably be captured in a macro. I also think that there are some places in here where gotos could actually be used for some of that stuff. For like instances where you have to sort of stand up something in multiple stages. So you have to allocate some stuff and then stand up several things. And if one of those things fails along the way, you have to free at the end. Instead of repeating code there, you could use a goto for that. So I do that as well. That's one of the only valid uses for a goto, but it is a valid use. So I do that. Let me build this. I think this is probably going to fix that loading issue. So we'll open up here and we'll load. And I'm actually just going to let this rip. And we might have actually still, yeah, we're still missing it. So step through it again and see what we missed. All right, so load, whoops. Here's the window, pressing L. So we will create the mesh, add the mesh. So the state at this point is loaded. So that's going to be beyond initialized, right? Oh, I already see the problem. This should be greater than or equal to loaded, which is going to mean the skybox is actually going to have the same bug, right? Because if we're in the loaded state, that's technically a valid state to be in as well, where we should be loading this. So that's a second issue. All right, so we have this, and I'm going to let this rip, and now we see all that stuff has popped in. So we have loaded it at least. However, Even though it's loaded, it's not drawing. Why is it not drawing? I'm going to guess we probably are not updating the generation again. So let's go back to testbed main. Whoops, we're already in that. Render. Actually, no, the update is what we want, because that is what is going to determine this, right? Whether or not we actually load these things or not. So I'm going to put a breakpoint there. I'll say meshes. It was 3 and 4 actually, so we already have 3 here. Our generation is 0. We have a geometry count of 1. Here's our geometry. Its generation, though, is still invalid ID, which is interesting. Our material here is, yeah, so this is the Falcon, right? This generation has not flipped over yet, interestingly enough. So, even though our generation is correct here, we're doing all of this. We're even pushing it into world geometries. So this actually isn't the issue. All right, so that means it's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably getting flagged because of this invalid generation. Which I don't know why that wouldn't be flipping over. It should certainly be. So let's see. Let's look at render. And we're going to build the packet for the world, and then I don't think this actually checks anything with that. I think this is actually going to be render a code. Render view world. I don't think this actually checks. Let's see. So we're sorting by transparency here. We're not actually checking. Yeah, we're not checking generation here at all. Okay. So yeah, this is going to be render a front end. Actually, we want Vulkan backend, and then we want renderer frame. Or do we want? No, it wasn't that. We want geometry draw. So this right here is probably, this is probably where it's failing, I'm guessing. So I'm actually going to continue. And that's not where it's failing. It's not getting hit. Let's see. So I guess that's not it. Maybe it's on the front. Draw geometry. This is just a pass through to the back end, which is just this. Why no render? Because I'll bet if I go to testbed main and I put a breakpoint here and wait a minute, this, if I flip this geometry generation, can I not? So if I set that to 0, let's see if that completely just hollers at us, right? Or if it does the thing. Nope, that didn't do anything. So I think it actually legitimately is not completing the load for some reason. Let's see if we got any errors. Nope. Successfully loaded mesh sponza. You know what, instead of reading it from the logs. What is it? Let's go to bin console.log. It's a little easier. Successfully loaded mesh Falcon. So that is interesting, because it does say that it completed the load, but it's not drawing it. And our draw count, I think, was 5 once we did that. So let me load. Right, and then here, I'll put a breakpoint. Draw count is 2. Interesting. Okay, well that might be because one of these things is getting called. $397. So it thinks that the sponza obviously is going to be drawn. But then it's subsequently not doing that. So I guess let's look at world geometries. So we'll say app frame data world geometries. And let's look at, I don't know, number 4. So the geometry here, yeah, see we have an invalid generation. So these are never getting flipped over for some reason. So we know our other flow works, where we add them after doing this mesh create down here. So when we add, I guess let's step into this, right? Let's do the Falcon first, because we're not getting this error. I wonder if it's because we're using this and not the actual. So this car mesh should be set to, well, what was that? That's the unload, okay. So we're setting that to the address of 3, and sponza mesh is the address of 4. I don't see anything wrong with that. We should just be able to use that pointer as is. Okay. So, yeah, I guess we'll break here. Just looking to see if there's like a false where there should be a true. I don't think so, though. Right, because this is basically what we used to do. This is the mesh load from resource, which ultimately this mesh create does. Whoops, wait a minute. No. So if we have a resource name, then we, yeah, I wonder if I wonder if this is the problem. So let's see. All this is doing is, well, let's see. What is this breakpoint? Go away. All right, so here's the window, pressing L. So we've created the mesh. The car mesh has an invalid ID for the generation, which is what we expect. Geometries is a null pointer. Geometry count is 0. Okay, so that's all things we expect. When we add this, we are in a loaded state, so we should go ahead and call mesh initialize. This does not create geometry count or geometries. Instead, all it does is return true, which I think is fine because this should be done by the next step. So we do that, and then we are loaded. So we're going to mesh load. If we have a resource name, then we do load from resource. So we're passing the resource name, that's Vulkan. We pass the mesh, which is what gets written to. So the first thing we do is invalidate the ID, which makes sense. We set up mesh load params. We set the params out mesh, so we basically just take a copy of the pointer for the job params. We go ahead and create the job. So the job should have everything it needs. And then mesh job load success. Let's go ahead and put a breakpoint on that. So put that here, right? And we'll submit that job, return true, which means this is successfully considered loaded, which I don't know that I love. And then we push that mesh, which essentially takes a copy of that pointer at that place in time, which should be fine. Return true. So that should be perfectly fine. We'll go ahead and just step over this for the sake of time here. We push this one onto the array as well. Okay, and then we return true, and that is the end of the handler. So when we have the mesh job success, we go ahead and grab the config. This is from the loaded resource. We create the geometry count and the geometries, so that should be 1 essentially, and then we create the array for that, so that's fine. We do, for each one of these, we acquire from config, just like we have in the past, right? We have outmesh generation, that's 255. That is a U8, right? Yes, it is. So we should flip that over to 0, right? And then successfully loaded mesh, we unload the resource, and then that's it for that job. So at this point, in the update, I'll put down here our draw count, right? Our draw count here is 3. That may only be the boxes. So let's have a look at what those are. Geometry. Yeah, I think that's just the boxes, which is fine. What we probably ought to be looking at is state meshes 3, which is going to be our Vulkan, right? So we still have the config for that. The generation is 0. The geometry count is 1. The geometry itself still has a generation of 65,535, which is invalid ID. So the question is, why is that not getting flipped over? Because clearly the job succeeded. So I guess the next thing I'm going to do is look for basically anywhere this is used, which is not that much. Really? So we're just, wait a minute. Geometry generation. We're not setting this to 0 anywhere? Really? Does this not actually do it either? Create geometry. So we invalidate it here. But the renderer technically should do it. It's not a re-upload. So we allocate, we load the range, do the index data. The internal data generation we do. But that's for the Vulkan geometry data, not the actual, okay. I wonder if there's not anything actually using this, I don't think. All right, but for the sake of argument, let's do here. G generation plus plus. Kill those breakpoints real quick. Okay. So we still don't have a different result here. Let me check. me set a breakpoint here and just look at state meshes 3. Oh, probably need to go down here a little further. Generation, geometries. First one. Okay, so we have geometry generation 0. I think this wasn't being used. We might actually be able to get rid of that because we have an internal generation we're using instead. So I may wind up actually getting rid of that because I don't think it was actually being used or looked at or anything. All right, so you are fully loaded. I guess let me have a look at the I'm just very curious as to why this isn't working. Because it should. Right, so let's kill some of these extra things we don't need. And I'm just going to keep a tracker on I, which I guess I already have up here at the top, but whatever. And then M generation. Okay, so I'm going to actually put my breakpoint here. Right, so 1, 2. So the next one is 3, so its generation is there. And 4 is there as well. And then 5 is invalid, which is what I expect. So when we get down here to the bottom, our draw count is 397. So something is causing this basically to just not do what we're expecting it to do. For some reason, those last messages aren't just aren't being added to the packet. So I guess let's do a step in here and just see what we're given. So let's see. Geometry data count is 397. So the only things that could break us out are this. This for transparency. Right, so one or the other of those is going to happen. Then we do a quick sort. So there's nothing else here that should realistically boot us out. Nightloan, you're back. Yay, welcome back. So let's see if that gets caught. Nope, it doesn't. So it's not like any of them are failing. So everything I can see is telling me that they are indeed getting sent to the GPU. I wonder if it's a transform issue. Yep. It is. Okay. So yeah, the geometry qualifies to be drawn, but for some reason our transform is zeroed out. So that's neat. The only thing I can think of. Oh, I bet I know what's causing that, actually. I think I know what it is. Shrink this back down. On key is right above that. This mesh create, I think, zeroes out the whole thing. So, this is another out of order thing. The computer is doing exactly what I'm telling it to do. Basically, what I've done down here is we're loading up all these cubes, right? And the reason that these work and the others don't is because a little bit further down, where was that? Right here. Look what we're doing. We're setting the transform position stuff here. And then we're calling create above, and what do you know? It zeroes all this stuff out, which is why it's not working. So we technically need to take this stuff, move it up to on key, or I guess the one above it, which is what? On debug event. And we need to move it here. So we add the mesh, and let me just split these up. Right, let's do this. Put this here, right? And then we've already... Do we even need car mesh, honestly, beyond this point? We actually even need that at all? We're using it anywhere? Only to unload. No. We're not using that anywhere else. All right, you know what? I'm going to get rid of these because these are dumb. Right? We can just use our numeric things, right? So we'll say state meshes 4, right? And we'll use the address of that. And we'll just use that here and here. We'll get rid of this. We'll use that. Meshes 4 there. Meshes 4 there. Change that to a dot. Right? And we'll just do it that way. So that way, after we have loaded it and created the mesh and added the mesh, then we'll go ahead and set its new ID, which I guess we could move this up, right? We could do that there. In fact, this should probably not even be done here. Because I think mesh.c does that for us somewhere. Was it in initialize? I could have swore we had that in here somewhere. We did not. Okay, but we probably should. Because down here, when we're doing all this, are we doing... We're not doing it here, are we? Do we have identifier imported here? No. So it's got to be mesh. Identifier. Yeah, I'm doing that right here. Yeah, so let's actually take this and we'll put it here. will acquire the identifier when we load the mesh. And that will be whether we go through the resource flow or whether we go through the code flow. So that means that I can go back up here and eliminate another thing. So all we really need to do is set the transform, right? Oops. So what is going on with my formatter? So we create the mesh, we add the mesh to the scene, and then we set its transform. Doesn't necessarily have to be done in that order, but we're hitting all the steps we need to hit. So the other thing that we need to do is change over this guy to use the address of the 6th. Oh, wait a minute. I think it was 3 and 4 I was using, not 4 and 5. This should be 3, 3, and 3. And this should be 4 all the way down. So 4. Again, we're only doing this because this is like, just hacky sort of temporary game code, right? All right. So that's meshes 4, which is Sponza. So again, we create, add mesh, set the transform. I think that's everything. So the reason it wasn't drawing is basically because it had a 0 scale. Oh, what did I miss? Oh, unloading. Okay, so this just means to be 3 and 4. Cool. All right. So we'll load this up. I'm going to remove all of my breakpoints that I hit along the way. What idiot thing did you do, Nightlone? All right, so let me back up. L. Aha. We are up and running again. Sweet. So, that took a little bit longer than I anticipated. So I'm glad that that I started a little bit sooner tonight, because it gives me a little bit of a head start on this stuff. So now I can actually continue to where I wanted to kind of begin tonight in the first place. And we're only like 30 minutes behind, so it's not a big deal. Sedhu13, yo, I just saw your message. I was kind of buried in between some of the other ones, but hello. All right, so I do want to take a quick minute just to let you guys know this is an interactive stream, so I just want to remind you guys, if you have any questions along the way, or you just want to say hi or anything, feel free to jump into the chat, and I will answer you to the best of my ability. So I am keeping an eye on it. I do answer as we go. So what we're doing right now is I just actually fixed the mesh loading in the scene logic. So now we can actually add those things to the scene and whatnot. And that is all working. What we need to do now is actually have the scene generate the render packet for the world, right? So it needs to be part of this step. We just need to move that in there. Right. So let's see. Nightlone. I guess certain words are auto-modded. Yes. It picked up on the word idiot for some reason. But I allowed it. You started a stream to test your mic, spent about 30 minutes talking. OBS settings had your mic cutting out the entire time. Sweet. So I'm guessing that's like the noise gate or whatever. All right, so I'm going to go to simple scene render packet, populate render packet rather. We're basically going to do a similar thing as we're doing here. And again, this is super crappy. We're eventually going to cache this. For right now, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to put another to-do in there, right? So I'll paste this code in here for a second. And I realize this is very, very naive, kind of crappy way to do it, but this is the way that we're going to stand it up, and then we'll optimize and clean it up later once we get everything working. All right, so we're going to basically take a look at the view type, and in this case, we want the view type world. So we just need to extract that. And actually, so once we find this, we actually should be breaking here, right? Because we don't need to actually continue with that loop. So in this case, we always want the skybox to render first, right? So we are going to have a separate loop because these things could be potentially out of order, and we don't want to have a bug introduced that way. Because if the application is configured to do something else first, it might mess this up. Let's see. So probably I just recorded myself this time just to see what I need to fix. Yeah, fair enough. I do that all the time as well. Still doesn't work sometimes. Okay, so this is world. Whoops. Why is my tab key hitting or giving me an I? What the heck, VS Code? All right. So world. So this is going to be a little bit strange as far as how this works. So we're going to have to combine some steps that we were doing in our update in our testbed main into sort of this step here. So before we had this app frame data world geometries, which is basically a list of geometries that we have been using every time to figure out what we're going to draw and not draw based on the frustum culling. So we actually need to move that as well. So before I do this, I'm going to comment that out because we're moving it in here. So basically all of this stuff here, where we're getting the frustum, which I think we actually need this stuff for the camera. So we may actually have to add some stuff to our frame data as well, because I don't think we have access to the camera, or what is the current camera. And we could potentially have multiple scenes, so we don't necessarily want to hold that in the scene. Our camera manager should probably be responsible for that, right? So technically speaking, it's going to be all of this, right? And I'm just going to comment that out for right now in here and come over to simple scene. And before we can build our packet, we actually have to perform all that logic first, right? So I'll leave this in here because this is our bounding sphere calculation. We can leave that there just as an example. So we need camera forward, which is going to be, I think it's under include, was it? So all of that under camera. Yes. Yeah, so that's under renderer camera, okay. Go back. So renderer camera. So we need that. What else do we have down here? So we don't have the game state, right? And technically, I think all we need from that is the world camera, right? So that's actually being pulled in a bunch of places. And then we have this app frame data, which is the world geometries, where we're sort of reserving a D array. We're going to do that a little bit differently as well. We need our math types in here, or our kmath. So I'm going to include math kmath. All right, so that should resolve all those things down here. All right, so our world geometries was in our frame data, right? Which is not something we want to really have anymore. So our app frame data was passed in here. Where was it? Application frame data. So this is actually that was the only thing that was there. Okay. So the scene definitely shouldn't be using the application frame data of any kind. We definitely don't want that. So what I'm going to do is we can't have an empty struct, right? We don't need that array, but we do want to reserve this because we are eventually going to need application-specific frame data for testbed stuff that we're going to do. So what I'm going to put in here is just an I32 dummy, right? And then that's just going to be what it is. We're not going to use it for right now. But there we are. So what we were doing before was we were having these, we had this sort of app frame data, world geometries that we were destroying and recreating every time. That's rubbish. We don't want to do that. We're going to get rid of that. We were clearing the frame data here. That's actually done elsewhere now, so we can get rid of that comment. Need a version of this that uses the frame allocator. This is actually resolved now. Ensure this is cleaned up to avoid leaking memory. Yeah, that's actually another thing we've taken care of, so we can get rid of that. All right, so what we really need is a way to get the camera, and then somewhere to store all of these meshes that we want to draw. So in our simple scene where we're building all of this out, currently we're just doing a D-array reserve on every frame. That's fine, but the problem with this is that we're dynamically allocating on every frame, and our D-array does not have a way to actually use our frame allocator to get its memory, which is something that we probably ought to have as an enhancement at some point. I'm not going to do that enhancement now because that's a little bit outside the scope of what I'm working on, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole at the moment. So I think what I might do is I might leave this in place for right now, but turn it into a local variable. So I'm just going to say world geometries like that. And then I'll put a to-do, use frame allocator, right? And then we have this right here, which is pushing to that, right? So then we have our world geometries, our draw count, and then we build our packet. And that's going to use the world geometries here. And then we actually need to de-array destroy world geometries so we don't leak memory. Okay. And again, bad, right? We don't want to be doing that every frame. So I really need to have a de-array that can use a linear allocator for its memory. Or I guess we could use a You use a stack or some other structure that's maybe a little bit better suited to that. Okay, so the next thing that we need is our world camera. So from that, we're going to actually have to add that to our frame data. So our frame data is just going to, we're going to put in a struct camera, and do I really want to put that at the engine level though? I don't think I do. I'm not going to do it that way. Instead, does the render packet actually have it? It does not. Nor probably should it. But when we're calling simple C and populate render packet, we know at that point what camera we're going to be using. So let's modify this. I don't think we have camera in here anywhere. So struct camera. We will pass it as the second parameter. So struct camera current camera. And we'll put it in here. Param current camera, the current camera to use while rendering the scene. All right, and then obviously we'll have to move this over to the definition, which is in the C file, which I can't find for some reason. Right, and then we can just use down here current camera, which actually, does that want a, yeah, it does want a pointer, which we already have, so perfect. So we can use world camera, or current camera rather, for that. Frustum create wants a pointer to the position, so we need the current camera position, the address of that. State camera frustum. We don't really need that stored in the state anymore because the frustum itself is just a local thing here now. So let's just change that to frustum f. Oh boy. Okay, we have the state, width, and height. So we probably are going to need to go ahead and get that piped over as well. Most of those errors are resolved though, so that's good. So we are going to need width and height. So our frame data does not include that. Should we pass that in as well? Now I'm beginning to think we need a structure for this, because this is beginning to be a lot of parameters, right? We don't really want to pass in a million parameters. Because we need width and height, which could be the window size or maybe not. So I don't necessarily want to make that assumption here. Although actually really all it needs is an aspect ratio, actually. Which is probably better to pass aspect ratio. Yeah, let me do that instead. So we'll pass F32 aspect. All right, we'll take this out of here. Aspect. We'll have to go over to the scene, put in F32 aspect. Again, we'll put that right here. So param aspect, the aspect ratio. State meshes. Okay, well, that is actually going to be based off of our internal list. So I'll change that in a second. Let me go back actually here and update our function, right? Which we actually don't have a draw count, so we're going to have to find some way to fix that. I have an idea about that. So application render. So here we are passing the current camera, which I think was state world camera, and then the aspect, which is that. Oh, that's supposed to come before p-frame data. Right. Okay, so that's updated. Crap. Our pick pass is also going to need to have access to that data, that same data. Okay, so I'm actually going to have to... I'm actually going to have to do this one at the same time. Ugh. Okay. So let me get that out of here. Go back into render packet. And I'll group this up. Right after we do the world, we'll also do the pick pass. And I need the UI data. Shoot. So that's going to be another thing that I'm going to have to pick apart. All right, you know what? I'm not going to do that right now. I'll come back to it. But what I will say is the world mesh data, I'm actually just going to set to 0 for right now. Right, we'll fix this later. For now, I'm just going to disable picking of world meshes. It is what it is. We'll come up with a better way to share that data. The draw count is something we still probably want to maintain. So I think actually a good place for that is actually going to be frame data. But it's a constant pointer. So we're going to have to adjust that if we want to change it. Well, let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say U32 drawn mesh count. Brief, the number of meshes drawn in the last frame, right? So this is technically, since we're doing this during rendering, we're not going to know this for the update loop in this particular frame. It's going to have to be the last frame's data, but that's fine. That makes sense. Because now if we go in here and we have draw count, right? So we're going to say frame data. Do we not have frame data included? We don't. Include core frame data. Let's get that towards the top. Oh, we did. Why isn't that coming up then? Oh, p frame data. Drawn mesh count equals 0. Right, so when we're rendering, we've got 0 there. And this is going to bleat because it is not a modifiable L value, because it is const. So we are going to get rid of const here. I'm okay with modifying this structure in this case. Okay. Is that going to be a problem here in the testbed main though? Yes, it is, because it's constant. Crap. So how did you get your mic settings figured out? Like for OBS? I mean, technically I'm using Streamlabs, but I have 4 or 5 different filters that I've figured out and configured and set up based on the way that I want my mic tuned. So yeah, it was actually a lot of trial and error. I basically sat there and did exactly what you're suggesting, where you sort of record. But I also use these headphones to monitor the sound. I don't have my voice turned on normally, but when I'm tuning the microphone, I will actually have the voice also pipe back into the microphone or the headphones here so that I can hear what it's going to sound like. And then when I have it where I think I want it, I go ahead and record a video and then listen to that on my speakers. It's just sort of a trial and error thing. Okay. So the update loop, it could be const. But the render, see, that would be a good place for it. But now I've gone and made it const. Fun, yeah. So I think I'm going to unconst this because I do want to occasionally be able to write to it. Which sucks because I did that in like 8 places. And so, here, let's go ahead and look for the entry. Why is this bleating? I don't see anything there wrong. Okay. So we load this. Platform dynamic library load function. Right, so this is what? The 1, 2. So 0. Wait. So update and render. These are constant. This is not a constant pointer anymore. All right, hopefully that works. I know I've got some other busted stuff here, but let me just do this just in case. All right, so simple scene. The mesh. This is actually going to go from. Let's see. So this is going to be scene. Meshes. All right, we need the array length of that. U32 mesh count. So as long as we're less than mesh count, then we want scene meshes sub I. We do not want the address of that because that is already a pointer. So that should fix that. Okay. Let's just build this real quick. All right. So this should be frame data. No, P frame data. Drawn mesh count plus plus. So we'll increment that. This should just be the address of F for frustum. So kill that. All right, testbed main undeclared identifier draw count. So this is going to be P frame data draw count, drawn mesh count rather. So we've got that. And the only other thing here is this app frame data, which is, why is it bleating about that? Unused variable. Okay, fine, I'll comment it out. All right, so let's go to render. And let me just make sure, I think I already commented it out. So I'm just gonna move it up here. Okay. Let's see if this works. I don't know if setting this packet thing down here to 0 is actually the right move. That might cause it to crash. We'll see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what that actually is. That's not even what I want. Debug, stack trace. Yep. There it is right there. Okay, so I can't just simply set that to 0. That's fun. But I guess what I could do is just modify this a little bit. So let's see. So I could just say, if not world mesh data, 0, otherwise get the darray length. And then it won't even try to read the array, right? Because it thinks there's 0. Oh, now what? Another one? The heck else? Oh, one was generating the packet and one was, okay. So we'll do the same thing here. So world geometry count, if not that array, meaning it doesn't exist, then we'll do 0, otherwise we'll get the darray length. All right, run again. Sweet, we're running. So let me load up. Looks like our mesh is all loaded in correctly. So that's good. It looks like our draw count is also working down here. You can see that. So if we back way out, we can actually see we're drawing all the things, right? So that's good. Our frustum culling is working. Yeah, all right. So that's pretty good. We're still doing good on time too. I do eventually need to sort out what this is all about, but I think I'll come back to that once we finish our implementation here. All right, so we have done the skybox and we have done the world. So those are the renderable objects that we're concerned with for right now. So we can go ahead and get rid of these and just say tell our scene to generate relevant packet data. Now, I suspect we're going to have some issues when we have multiple scenes because I think some of those some of this logic is creating or recreating some of those geometry arrays, so I suspect there's going to be problems with that, but we'll come to that bridge when we cross it, okay? All right, UI we're not concerned with. The pick pass is going to be a little bit weird. We're probably going to have to pull off some sort of way to get the world mesh data out of our generated packet, right? So we have this right here. So we are going to eventually have to figure that out. It's just a matter of where to actually pull that from. Actually, I wonder. So that was using the world geometries. Which is just geometry render data, which I would already actually technically have in the already generated packet. Would it be geometry rendered? There it is right here. We could just use this. So I could just pass that through. Here. Let's try that real quick and see if it works. So theoretically, we've already generated that data, right? So we should technically be able to... and it did work. Sweet. Okay, another problem solved. That was actually easier than I thought it was going to be. Cool. All right, so we already have that list of geometries. Now, granted, this is using a hard-coded index, which is kind of crappy, but non-hard-coded index. Let's put a to-do on that and put a pin in it. All right, so our picking is actually working again, so we're not actually moving backwards, which is good. What is the next? I guess the next portion of this is going to be to add the lights, right? I guess that's going to be the next thing. So what we've done is, you know what, I can actually get rid of all this. Let me get rid of all this junk, this dead code, right? This is all junk. Let's get rid of that. Move lighting code to CPU. That's actually done. Okay. So up here, where we are adding in our cubes, right, and whatnot, this is probably where we need to go ahead and add our lights. Although technically lights don't really have any resources to be added for now. So basically what we're going to wind up doing is the lights that we add, we're going to set in the simple scene, and then the simple scene is also going to be responsible for adding it to the lighting system. So once we do that, then the lighting system is also used to, let's see. I think is that used in the, it's used by the view, I want to say. No, it's used by the material manager. That's right. Material system. right here. So we can actually start taking some of this stuff and actually pulling it from whatever scene we're actually rendering. But this doesn't have a concept of a scene yet, so I don't think I'm going to do this part of it yet. So I think we'll do the adding half. I'm going to get rid of this though. So I think I'm going to do the adding half in the scene to add it to the light system. But I think I'm going to leave out the retrieval for now, because I need to think about that a little bit. So what we can do is, first off, take all of these lights and move them from here to up here before we initialize our scene. Right, so we'll configure them here. And then we're going to replace these calls from the light system add directional and point. We'll replace those with calls to add it to the scene. So we have simple scene add directional light. We'll start here. So we'll add this call here. We are going to need the light system. Oh, we already have it. Perfect. And here we're just going to pass through the light. Right. The simple scene to add the direction, the light itself, we need to say if not seen. First off, return false. Otherwise, we're going to say scene directional light equals light. Okay, and that's all it's going to do for right now. I am going to put a to-do here. Do any resource unloading required. Okay. Okay, so all this is going to do is just set a pointer and then add it to our light system. This does return a Boolean, so we should probably check that. So we're going to be explicit, k-error, failed to add light to light system. We should probably be explicit and say directional. Oops. Directional light to light system. All right, and then here we'll return false. Okay. So that's the adding directional light. So now we can go back to our testbed main here. And simple scene add directional light. The address of state scene, main scene rather. And then we will do, I think that's, yeah, it's not a pointer. So we need the address of state directional light. Right? And then obviously if this fails for some reason, we'll go ahead and bleat about it. So k-error failed to add directional light to main scene. All right, but I'm not going to count that as like the type of failure that is going to completely prevent the whole thing from loading, right? I don't think that's quite necessary. All right, so the next thing we need is to take this add point light, go into the simple scene where we do add point, and we're just going to paste this here. And here we're just going to pass the light, right? So first off, obviously, if not seen, return false. This should be if not seen or not light, because we don't want to add a null light. Technically, we can use this to unset a directional light. So I'm actually going to wrap this in a call. So if light, right? If we have a light, we're going to add it. In fact, if we have a different one that's not the same, we need to actually remove it from the light system. So if scene directional light, so if it already exists, we'll move this to do in here. And we'll say light system remove directional. And then scene directional light. Excuse me. Let's see. So if we already had one, remove it. If we're then adding one, we want to go ahead and add that directional light. And then if all of that is successful, then we go ahead and set the light. That makes more sense. Okay. The next thing is we just need to add our point light. So our point light, I think we set these up as a D array, I believe. Yep, right here. So all we should have to do is basically just add it to that list. But before we actually do that, we do have a limit of 10 lights in the lighting system. So I don't remember, oops. I don't remember if this actually, okay, so the lighting system's actually aware of this. So it will fail for us, so we don't have to worry about that here. So, if we fail to add it, then we're going to say k error. Oops. Failed to add point light to scene. Light system add failure check logs, right? And then return false. If at this point we actually succeed with this, then we want to go ahead and de-array push scene point lights. And we want to push the light. Yep, and that should be good. Cool. So I guess we have remove directional light, which we could also do, technically speaking, by just saying add directional light and pass a null pointer, but for the sake of, I guess for the sake of completeness, we'll have a removal API here as well. So if not seen or not light, return false. So if light is not equal to scene, I can't type tonight, direction light, then we'll go ahead and return false. But we'll say k warn cannot remove directional light from scene that is not part of the scene. All right. Otherwise, if that checks out, then we could do a light system remove directional light. We'll pass along light. If that fails for some reason, k error failed to remove directional light from light system. turn false. And only if we get past all of that do we actually say scene directional light equals 0. Okay. Removing a point light is going to be largely the same. So I'm actually going to grab this. The only difference is we're going to loop through the lights we have in the scene. So in this case, we'll say for U32 light count equals the array length scene directional light. Oops, not directional light, point lights. Okay, for U32 I equals 0, I is less than light count plus I. If scene point lights sub I equals light, then we go ahead and remove it, right? So we'll say d array pop at scene lights, point lights rather. Index is here. The value pointer is going to be, we'll just say point light pointer rubbish, right? And we'll just pass rubbish. We don't really care about the popped value in this case. So we'll go ahead and pop that. And we'll also say light system remove point light. Check that for errors. K error. Failed to remove point light from light system. Return false. If all of that works out, then at that point we should probably do this first. And then return true. Right? And technically, if we get all the way down here, we should return false. Because that means we didn't find the light. So K error. Cannot remove a point light from a scene of which it is not a part. Cool. So that's removing a point light. Remove mesh and skybox. We'll come back to that. I want to just mainly see if this works. So back to testbed main. I already did this, right? To add the point light. I think I did. That's the remove add point. Yeah, okay. So here, we're basically, I'm just gonna copy this. So add point light, point, and this is going to be the address ofplights 0. Right? Okay, so that's the first one. This is the second one, so sub 1, and then this is going to be sub 2. And okay, so we have 3 point lights and our directional light that have been added here using our new scene calls. You're extra late today. Oh, no worries, mate. It's all good. Thank you for showing up. This is kind of an extra stream today anyway, so we've made some pretty decent progress actually. I finished up, at least for now, the addition of meshes to the scene. And so we have those being added both ways, from being created in code or loading from an asset, being added before we actually stand up the scene, and also being added after we've stood up the scene. So all that stuff works. And now we're actually working on the lighting portion of that. So I'm kind of doing the point lights and directional lights kind of at the same time. So I've just got something here. Let me see. Variable rubbish is uninitialized. Let me use here. You know what? Let me just, I guess, I don't know, pass the address of rubbish, right? It's technically a pointer. It's just bleating that it's uninitialized. We don't care about the variable there, hence it's called rubbish. All right. So let me go ahead and load up our geometry, and hey, we have our lights. So we can see here that this one light is still moving. We can see our red light over there, our green light, our blue light. We have our directional light as well, because we can see all of the lighting sort of bouncing off these walls here. If we switch to our lighting mode here, we can see that a little bit more clearly. So what we're seeing right there is just sort of the two lights overlapping a little bit as this green light is actually moving along in space. So yep, that's because I had it on the wrong monitor. Sorry about that. It keeps starting on the monitor above, so I keep forgetting to drag it down every once in a while. So let me back up, right? So here's the normal view, right? We see that we have our three lights. So we have the red one here, the green one here, the blue one back there. We see that the green one is actually moving. If I switch to the lighting mode, we can see that a little bit more clearly. And there we are. We know our directional light is also working because we can see the light bouncing off all these objects here. So yeah, sorry about that. Every once in a while I forget to drag it down to the lower screen. So I'll try to be better about that. But yeah, so all of our scene stuff seems to be working, which is awesome. Now, the things that we haven't done are removing meshes, removing skyboxes, lights removal. Yeah, that probably will work. I guess what we could do is we could test that real quick. So let's do... You know what? Let's try unloading as well. So we have mesh unload here. Let's try unloading the whole dang scene and see what happens. It's probably not going to like it, right? This should be false, by the way. Actually, I should probably test the mesh unloading first. Let me try that real quick. So here we go. Load up the meshes. And I'm going to press U to unload. And it looks like it unloaded the thing. Now this does say unloading models there, so I'm hoping if we do a quick memory check here, yeah, we're only at 159 megs. So, and a lot of that is just buffers and whatnot that we've actually created. So, all right. So that works. So we should probably do unloading in the scene. Do Do I want to tackle that tonight? I'm not sure. Well, yeah, I guess it's unloading, so it's not really going to be terrible if we don't complete it tonight. So we have our scene update, which right now is technically not doing anything, which is fine. Simple scene unloaded. This is probably where we're actually going to end for the night, but let's go ahead and try that anyways. So first of all, if we don't have a scene, we return false. If we do have a scene, that we're going to show it as unloading. So in this case, what do I want to do? I guess I could unload the skybox first, right? So if scene skybox skybox unload scene skybox. I suppose we gotta check that, right? So if that fails for some reason, we'll bleat about it. Failed to unload skybox. But I'm not going to return false here because we just want to continue unloading. Like if we fail unloading, who cares, right? We should bleat about it, fix the problem, but ultimately it's not going to be something we should stop the application for. Okay, so that's the skybox. And then we're going to do a U32 mesh count equals the array length. Scene meshes for U32I equals 0. I is less than mesh count plus I. Oops. And then I guess we could just say if does mesh unload, I think, has some checks in it to see if it's released or if it's loaded. No, not really. Just checks to see if it's there. So I guess we could look at the generation, right, and make sure that the generation is not an invalid ID before we attempt to unload it. Scene meshes sub I generation is not equal to what's that, U8, I think? Yeah, invalid ID U8. And then we'll go ahead and unload it. Right. We do, I think, need to check that because I think it is, yep, turns a Boolean. So if that fails, K error, failed to unload mesh. Again, we're not going to boot out of that. We're just going to report it. Okay, so that's that. Next comes the directional light. So if scene directional light, then we will do scene, simple scene remove directional light, which is actually going to do everything we needed to do. For now, anyways. So scene, and then scene directional light. Okay. I suppose we could check that too, although I can't see any reason why it would fail. Let's go ahead and capture it. Failed to unload, remove directional light. Note, if there are resources to unload, that should be done before this next line, right? So if we ever have resources of any kind, we would definitely want to unload those. So an example of a resource is like if we had, I don't know, maybe a box mesh that showed up in the scene to represent it, so we know where it actually is, which is something we're going to be doing. That's an example of something we'd want to unload here. Let me put that as a to-do, actually. Example, box representing position color. Okay. So that's the directional light. We also are basically going to do the same exact thing for point lights. So I'm just going to copy this. P light count. This is going to be point lights. And then loop through the P light count. And it's basically going to be more or less a copy of this, right? So we want to remove point light. In this case, it's going to be point lights sub I. And we'll say point light, right? So we'll just remove all the point lights, which will also accomplish what we need to do, removing it from the lighting scene. And is there anything else we need to do? I don't think so. That should handle the unload. All right, so let's go ahead and we know this works, right? So let's go ahead and simple scene unload. And we'll say state main scene. And if we fail, we'll capture it. Okay, error failed to unload scene. We're going to capture it, but we're not going to do anything about it. Okay. Let's just put done here, right? Just so we have something in the console indicating that's done. Okay, so here goes. I would imagine the update loop is probably not going to like this very much, but we'll see. All right, so we'll go ahead and load up all of our meshes. Right, and now I'm going to press U and watch it crash. Yep, I figured as much. Dang it. All right, so looks like we have an invalid instance ID. So we're binding the skybox. All right. So I guess I think probably what's happening is we're unloading, I'm guessing while a frame is being drawn. But I'll also bet that we're probably not checking the skybox to see if we actually have anything to draw in the view. So let's look at here. All right, and we're only going to do this if we have scene skybox. And actually in our unload, so we're unloading this. We're not destroying it. But we should probably unset it. So scene SB equals 0. That feels wrong to do though without. So we're unloading it here. We really should do that in the destroy. Yeah. So the destroy does the unload. We destroy the point lights, the message, but we don't unset scene directional light equals 0, right? Scene skybox equals 0. We don't unset those things, so that's definitely an issue. All right, so we'll load up, and we will unload, and it looks like we're getting some weirdness here. Let's see. Wow, it's still trying to draw the skybox. Okay, so I'm gonna guess that all this stuff has probably already been set up in a render packet to be drawn, and then we unloaded it. So, oh, you know what? There's another thing I need to check too. Not in here. It's going to be in our testbed main render rather. Oops, had it already. Okay, so the simple scene generate render packet. We should only be doing this if state main scene dot state is equal to loaded. If it's anything else, we shouldn't be drawing it. Which I think is going to cause some problems, but it should solve more problems as well. Okay. So here's the window. We'll load. And then we'll unload. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So let's double check and see. Yeah, I'm still wondering if we're running into a race condition. So what I'm thinking is, when we're unloading this scene, we probably shouldn't be doing it right away. We also probably should just go ahead and destroy it, right? we probably should flip a flag somewhere to say on the next frame, then perform the unload and destroy. And I'm thinking the reason for that is we don't want to get caught in a place where if we're handling this event in the middle of a frame, we don't want to be unloading resources that are needed for that frame to actually render. So, let's see. How do I want to do this? We have the testbed game state I suppose I could use. Let's do that. So let's say B8 unload main scene triggered. TME, thank you so much for resubbing 2 months. That's awesome. I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So unload main scene triggered, I guess. But we zero out that frame data every single time. So that's probably not going to work. Because this gets reset every frame. So we're not going to actually have that on the next frame, I don't think. We can try it. So testbed main. Update. I guess we do it during update. That's probably going to be a place to do it. So I guess we can start the update clock here. And then if state what? Where did I add that just now? Oh, to the frame data. No, I don't need it here. I need it in the testbed game state is where I want that. Here. Should probably come up with a better way to track this. But main scene unload triggered. Okay. And then we can say in here if state main scene unload triggered, then we do that. Okay, so unload the level here if triggered. All right, and then we're going to unset this flag immediately, right? So that it only happens once. And then in our on key, or rather here, all we're going to do is say state main scene unload triggered equals true. Right? And then it'll happen on the next update. So I don't know if this is going to completely solve the problem, but I suspect it will solve at least part of the problem. All right, so load and then unload. Damn it. Okay, so I guess I'm going to have to figure out I'll have to set a breakpoint when we actually do that. Oh, it's not engine that I want. It's testbed main. So when we hit this, which we're actually not hooked into our update either, by the way. So that's probably not great. All right. What? Oh, it's still running. Okay. Let's try that again. So load, unload. All right, so we're here. So I want to see what happens down here in render at this point. So right here. Because in theory, we shouldn't actually be doing any of this stuff. So it's already unloaded and destroyed at this point. So since it is not equal to that, we are not going to render any of that. UI meshes. Well, the UI should still render, technically. I wonder if it's something in here. So, well, that's a null pointer, so it actually shouldn't be. Right, because it should just world geometry count 0, right? So that works correctly as expected. These are the UI meshes, texts, required instance count, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that should all be fine. Okay, so there's our clock update, which this frame took a hell of a long time. That's fine. Let me see if I can figure out what is trying to render here. So we have draw frame. What view are we on? 0. So this is still trying to render the skybox. Skybox data is null. So that's probably what we should be checking then. So if we're trying to render a skybox and we get null, if not, actually we don't even need to do this cast first, right? We could just do packet for any of this really. Packet extended data. If we don't have that, I'm going to return true, only because we don't want this to count as a failure. Right? We want to say that it's done the thing. Yeah, so basically that render pass will just be completely skipped, which I think should be fine. We'll see. We may have to do some finagling around that. So let's go ahead and load up and unload. We know that's happening correctly. Oh yeah, it doesn't like that. It is it is not doing the thing correctly. Let's see. You're gonna leave now. Have a great time. Oh, cool. Cool. All right. Have a good one. Yeah, we're gonna be tying up here in a couple minutes, I think. Because now we've hit something where I think. Oh yeah, I was worried about this. So, okay, we actually can't. So we can't boot out of this entirely because this render pass is the one that is the first in line, is responsible for all the clearing and all that. We still actually need to do the render pass. So we can't just skip it, right? But we can begin it and end it without having done anything in between. So what we'll do how do you know how to make a game engine? I've made several game engines in the past, admittedly on various tech stacks and whatnot. But yeah, I've made quite a few in the past, a few of them commercially used. All right, so the render pass still needs to happen, but nothing in between it does if we don't have data to actually do anything with. So that might actually solve that issue. So we'll load, unload. Okay. All right. So this is actually what I expected to see. So it looks like we are still having some issues down here, a couple of minor errors, but we're still running, right? And most importantly, we've unloaded the scene. If I do a memory footprint, well, you're probably not gonna be able to tell from this, but we don't have much on the GPU at all. The only reason we have this much at all is because we've got some buffers allocated and whatnot, which are currently empty, but they're still allocated. So we could still move around, right? We can still rotate our camera. We can still move around, right? You see these things changing. We can turn off VSync, for example, and we still, are getting our feedback. So our engine's still running, but we're able to actually unload a scene now. So this is actually, I wasn't expecting this to work tonight. So this is actually an awesome place to end. So what this means is next time we're going to set up our events. Looks like we've got a couple things here to troubleshoot. Next time we're going to set up our events so that we can sort of repeatedly load and unload a scene, one after the other. And then after we do that, then we can have multiple scenes that we can sort of load, unload at a time, and switch from one to another. And that's really going to set us up for the next couple of things that we're going to do. So this is actually great that we got this far. Let's see. How different is it to make a game engine for consoles? They use Vulkan. That is a loaded question, but the answer I will say is yes, it's very, very different for consoles. Consoles have a lot of different requirements to your average PC, especially around memory use. There's a lot to consider in terms of memory layout that is more efficient on consoles that PCs don't necessarily have to worry about. Some consoles use Vulkan, so like the Nintendo Switch is one of those. But other ones like Xbox uses DirectX, and the PlayStation uses its own sort of proprietary flavor of OpenGL. I have heard that the PS5 can use Vulkan. I think that was a rumor that I read somewhere, but I don't have that confirmed, so I don't know that. I don't have access to a PS5 dev kit or any of that, and even if I did, I don't know that I'd be able to actually confirm that. But yeah, consoles are definitely a completely different beast. So at some point we will be writing a DirectX backend for this, and at that point it shouldn't be too difficult to port this to Xbox, but there are other considerations to go with that, such as NDAs and whatnot as well. So all right, so with all that said, let's go ahead and I think we are already on a feature branch, right? So yes, we are. So I'm going to add all this, git commit, scenes, loading, unloading, complete, some bug fixes required, need to hook up events to load, unload repeatedly. And we're going to go ahead and push. Right. And so now that that logic is available on the repo, so everything that we have done so far is not on that tab. Where did it go? So if you go to kohiengine.com, that's probably going to be the quickest way to get to it. You can just click this open source thing right here, and it'll take you right to the repo. The feature simple scenes is the branch that we're actually working on. So we've got 3 commits so far because we've done 3 streams on it. And so you can actually check these commits and see everything that we've done so far. I'm not ready to merge this into main yet, only because there is a little bit more work that we have to do. We found some errors and stuff that happen, and we need to just lock some things down and make sure that everything is working as expected. So we're not going to obviously have time to do that tonight, but you know, we made some serious progress tonight, which I'm super happy with. So with all that said, thank you guys again for tuning in and watching. I really appreciate the follows and the supports, and of course the subscriptions. If you guys would also like to check out my YouTube channel, all this stuff will be uploaded there as well as all the project history. So that is at youtube.com/Travis Vroman. So with that, let's go ahead and see if there's anybody on that I want to go ahead and raid. So I'm going to raid Nightlone Gamer. He's launching a new stream, and he's one of the mods on my Discord server actually. And so I'm going to raid his channel real quick. He's probably not expecting this, so let's go ahead and do that. And we will raid him in just a second. All right. See you guys.